You know that moment when your 8-year-old asks something so simple, so devastating, that it stops the world. That's where this starts. One daughter is a doctor, the other one is a maid, my father announced at Thanksgiving. Then he laughed. My daughter tugged my sleeve and whispered, "Mommy, is being a maid bad?" That was the last Thanksgiving I stayed silent. What I said next changed everything. My father hasn't hosted a holiday dinner since. But before I tell you what I said, you need to understand the 6 years before it. You need to know why the man my father tried to impress was the only person who already knew exactly who I was. My name is Thea O'Neill. I'm 31, a single mom, and for 6 years my family called me the maid. Let me take you back 6 years ago. I moved home with 2 suitcases and a 2-year-old on my hip. My ex-husband left on a Tuesday, cleared our checking account on Wednesday, and filed for divorce from his mother's address on Thursday. By Friday, I was on my parents' porch, holding a diaper bag, and whatever dignity I had left. My father opened the door. "The cottage out back is empty," he said. "This is temporary. Don't turn it into a habit. No hug. Just terms." The cottage was 300 square feet, 1 bedroom, kitchenette, cold shower. But it sat on my parents' land with no lease, just my father's word. Within a week I was cleaning houses for $15 an hour while a neighbor watched Lily. I scrubbed bathtubs for women who had the life I'd imagined. That same month Meredith, my older sister, finished her dermatology residency. My parents threw a dinner for 20 people. I showed up late wiping bleach off my hands. My father announced to every guest, "Sorry, Thea's late." She was scrubbing someone's bathtub. Everyone chuckled. I sat down and said nothing. That was the first time, not the last. Growing up, Meredith got SAT touring, AP summer camps, college visits to Duke and UVA. When she got accepted to medical school, my father took out a second mortgage to cover her tuition. Every penny, no hesitation. When it was my turn, he said, "Community college is plenty for someone like you." I still hear that phrase. I went to Blue Ridge Community College, paid for it myself, and graduated in 2 years with honors. Nobody came to my ceremony. At every holiday, my father introduced us the same way. "This is my daughter, Dr. Meredith O'Neill Hartley." Then, "And this is Thea, not Thea, who graduated with honors, just Thea." My mother never corrected him. What nobody knew was that Meredith's medical school cost $400,000. My father covered half. The rest was $180,000 in federal loans that Meredith carried silently while everyone called her successful. By my second year home, I'd cleaned over 60 homes. I noticed the Shenandoah Valley was full of vacation estates owned by people in D.C. who visited 4 times a year. These properties needed managing. Someone who could walk a plumber through at 7 in the morning and lock up after the caterer at midnight. I filed for an LLC, built a website at 2 in the morning while Lily slept, and named it Magnolia Estate Services. I signed 3 property contracts that month. I told my mother I was excited. "Mom, I just signed 3 clients. I'm building something." Patricia nodded. "That's nice, honey. Meredith just got invited to speak at a dermatology conference in Boston." I understood completely that nothing I built would ever matter in this house. That night, my phone rang. "Hi," the voice said. "I'm Gloria. I'm your father's sister. I think we need to talk." I almost dropped the phone. Gloria Ashford was a name you didn't say in this family. My father had a sister, past tense in his version. Gloria had divorced her husband 10 years before. In a town like Millbrook, that was enough to become a scandal. But she stayed, opened an antique shop, lived alone. Richard cut her off completely. "I heard about you from a client," Gloria said over coffee. "A woman whose lake house you manage. She couldn't stop talking about you." Gloria didn't waste time. "I want to invest in your company. $15,000, not a loan, equity. Because somebody should have believed in you a long time ago." 15,000 was more than I'd made in 3 months combined. I took the money, hired 2 part-time employees, and ran operations like a real company. 2 years later, I had 5 employees, 8 properties under contract. Magnolia was real. I reinvested every dollar, bought a work van, printed business cards. I was still living in the cottage, still without a lease. That's when Richard decided to remind me. It was Sunday dinner. Midway through the meal, Richard set his fork down. "That land out back is worth something now," he said casually. "I might need to rearrange things." "Rearrange things? How?" "Don't worry about it. Nothing is permanent." The room went quiet. Later that night, Patricia called me. Someone came to look at the property last week, she said. A developer? I don't know the details. It's probably nothing. I felt the ground shift beneath me. I started looking for a rental near Lily's school. The problem was Millbrook has a tight housing market. 3-bedroom rentals were almost non-existent and cost twice what I could manage. Patricia found out within a week. She called at 8 in the morning. You're looking at apartments? Your father will be devastated. That evening, Richard called. You move out, you're on your own completely. Don't expect babysitting. Don't expect Thanksgiving invitations. He knew exactly where to press. Lily called my parents every night before bed. Cutting that connection wasn't something I could do, and he knew it, so I stopped looking. Leaving at the wrong time would cost me everything I'd built. In a small town, Richard was respected. If I left, he'd frame it as abandonment. I needed to be strong enough that when I finally left, I wouldn't need anything from him. The cracks started showing in Lily first. Her teacher called me in. Lily's been quiet at lunch, she said. The other kids asked what her mom does for work. She just shrugged and looked away. I sat in that tiny plastic chair and felt something inside me splinter. My daughter, 8 years old, already learning to be ashamed of me. That same week an opportunity landed in my inbox. A new luxury development, 12 vacation homes. Annual value $340,000. Enough to double my revenue. Enough to leave. I called Gloria. Fear is a landlord too, Thea, she said. The rent keeps going up. That night I called the developer. Frank Calloway. Calloway Development. What can I do for you? I pitched. Frank didn't say yes on the first call. He said send me your portfolio. 3 days later Frank called back. I asked around. 3 different property owners told me the same thing. If you want it done right, you call Magnolia. We met at his office the following Monday. I wore my only blazer. Frank shook my hand and said, You're the real deal, Thea. Let's do this. I signed a 2-year management contract. Just like that, Magnolia went from a 1-van operation to a real company. That same week Richard called me to his study. I need you to sign some papers, he said. An agreement that you'll vacate the cottage by March. Why? Because it's my property. I looked at the document. I noticed the law firm name. Not a family attorney. A commercial real estate firm. I'm not signing anything tonight, I said. I'll read it first. I walked out. My hands were steady. My heart was not. Patricia's approach was softer. She invited me for tea the next morning. She'd set out the good cups. Your father is under a lot of stress, she began. His investments haven't been doing well. He needs to sell that land. Why didn't he just talk to me? We are talking. You're just not listening. Meredith would never make things this difficult. Meredith doesn't live in a cottage on Dad's land. Because Meredith made something of herself. The words landed like a slap, not because they were cruel, but because they came from my mother, the woman who braided my hair before school. I stood up. I closed the door behind me. That night my phone buzzed. A text from Meredith. Can we talk privately? My sister hadn't texted me in over a year. We met at a coffee shop. Meredith looked exhausted. Her hair was pulled back, no earrings. Donald wants a divorce, she said. I blinked. Since when? Since July. We've been pretending for 4 months. Why are you telling me? Because you're the only person in this family who knows what it's like to start over. I know they treat you differently, she said quietly. I never said anything. I should have. How much debt are you carrying? She flinched. 180,000 federal loans. I gave her a good divorce lawyer's name. 3 months before Thanksgiving, the phone call came. Magnolia had grown to 12 employees, 15 luxury properties. Revenue had crossed $2 million. I was running a real operation. Nobody in my family knew the scale. To them I was still Thea, the one who cleans houses. Then a journalist called. Hi Miss O'Neill. I'm with the Shenandoah Business Journal. We're doing a feature on local entrepreneurs under 35. Your name came up 3 times. I agreed on one condition. Please don't mention my family. The reporter spent 2 hours with me at one of the estates I managed. She treated me like a CEO because that's what I was. This issue publishes the week of Thanksgiving, she said. You'll get an advanced copy. I didn't tell my parents. Only Gloria, who laughed, warm and surprised. Well, she said, that's going to make for an interesting holiday. 2 weeks before Thanksgiving, I was helping Patricia with her guest list when Richard walked in, chest puffed, holding his phone like a trophy. Guess who's coming to Thanksgiving, he said. Who? Frank Calloway. He said the name like announcing royalty. Frank Calloway, owner of Calloway Development Group. Richard had been circling Frank for months to finalize the land sale. This is my shot, Richard continued. Calloway at our table. By New Year's the deal is done. I stood at the counter and felt my blood turn cold. Frank Calloway, the man I had a standing video call with every Tuesday. The man whose properties I'd managed for 2 years. My father had never once asked the name of my company. He'd never visited my office. And Frank had no reason to know my maiden name, or that the woman who ran Magnolia went home to a 300-square-foot cottage behind her father's house. 2 separate worlds about to collide. The Monday before Thanksgiving, my father called me to his study. The document was thicker this time, notarized, March 1st. Sign this by Thanksgiving, Richard said. After that, I'm involving a lawyer. I read slowly. On the second page, the sale price. $410,000. Richard was selling the land I lived on. I turned to the last page and saw the buyer's name, Calloway Development Group. My stomach dropped. My father was selling the property to my biggest client. The same man he'd invited to Thanksgiving. The same man who didn't know that the cottage Richard promised was empty, had me and my daughter sleeping in it. You told Frank the cottage was empty, I said. It will be, because you're making me leave. I set the papers down. Didn't sign, didn't argue, just walked to the door. Thea, his voice hardened. Don't make this harder than it needs to be. I'm not the one making this hard, Dad. I walked to the cottage and called my accountant, then my lawyer, then Gloria. Thanksgiving was in 5 days. For the first time in 6 years, I wasn't dreading it. I was ready. Thanksgiving morning smelled like cinnamon and rosemary. I dressed Lily in her green corduroy dress. She twirled in front of the mirror. Do I look pretty, Mommy? You look perfect. By 9 in the morning, I was in my parents' kitchen, apron on, hair up, hands in a turkey. Same as every year. Meredith arrived at noon in blowout and cashmere. Donald trailed behind her, silent. At 12:30, a black SUV pulled into the driveway. Frank Calloway and his wife Donna. Richard practically sprinted to the front door. Frank, welcome, welcome. Frank walked in, polite, composed. He scanned the room. Then he saw me standing in the kitchen doorway, apron on, sweat at my temples from 3 hours of cooking. Patricia swooped in. Oh, that's Thea, our younger daughter. She helps around the house. Frank nodded politely. A flicker crossed his face. But it passed. Richard led him out back to tour the land. Dinner started at 2. 14 people around the table. Richard stood at the head, tapped his glass. I want to give thanks, he said, for this family, for this home, and especially for my Meredith, Dr. Meredith O'Neill Hartley, who makes us all so proud. Applause. Meredith smiled, tight, practiced. Richard wasn't done. And of course Thea. He paused, grinned. One daughter is a doctor, the other one is a maid. He laughed. That low, self-satisfied chuckle. A few people laughed. The nervous kind. Most of the table went quiet. Frank, sitting 3 chairs away, didn't laugh. He looked at my father, then at me. Under the table, Lily's hand found mine. Her small fingers were cold. After the main course, Patricia stood up. I just want to add my own little toast, she said. Her voice was honey-sweet. To Meredith, the light of our family. She didn't say my name. She didn't look at me. And then, in the silence, came a small voice. Mommy. Lily. Sitting right next to me, eyes wide and wet. Mommy, why does Grandpa say you're just a maid? The table froze. Every fork stopped. Is being a maid bad? 8 years old, asking in front of 14 adults. Patricia recovered first. Lily, honey, Grandpa was just being funny, but nobody laughed. Silence, the kind that has weight. I looked at my daughter, this small, brave person who had just said what no adult had the courage to say. Something inside me, something bent for 6 years, finally broke free. I set my napkin down, pushed my chair back, and stood up. Lily, being a maid is not bad. Any honest work is good work. My voice was level, calm, but since Grandpa brought it up, let me tell you what Mommy actually does. Richard's smile vanished. Thea, sit down. This isn't the time. You made it the time, Dad. I didn't raise my voice. You stood up in front of 14 people and defined me. Now I get to define myself. The room was airless. Patricia's hand went to her throat. I started by cleaning houses. That's true. I'm not ashamed of that. But I didn't stop there. I let one beat pass. I built a company. It's called Magnolia Estate Services. I manage 15 luxury properties. I have 12 full-time employees. Last year my revenue was $2.3 million. Nothing. No sound. Just 14 people recalculating everything. Richard's face drained. His mouth opened, closed, opened again. From the far end of the table a glass was set down slowly. Frank Calloway was staring at me. Not with surprise, with recognition. Wait, he said. Frank stood. Thea O'Neill, he said. Frank stood. Thea O'Neill, he said. Frank stood. Thea O'Neill, he said. Frank stood. 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 Frank, you're the owner of Magnolia Estate Services. Every eye moved between us. Yes, Mr. Calloway. Frank turned to my father. His expression had shifted. Richard, you didn't tell me your daughter runs Magnolia? My father's mouth moved, but nothing came out. She's been managing my entire portfolio for 2 years, Frank said evenly. She's one of the best operators in the region. Richard gripped the back of his chair. I didn't know. You didn't know? Frank repeated it flatly. Richard, last Tuesday you told me your younger one was between jobs. The room inhaled. Between jobs. Aunt Carol covered her mouth. You invited me into your home, Frank said quietly. You introduced your daughter as the maid, and the whole time she's the person I trust with a portfolio worth more than this entire street. Nobody moved. The doorbell rang. Gloria had always had a sense for dramatic entrances. Patricia opened the door. Her face went white. Gloria Ashford stood on the porch in a navy coat, holding a bottle of wine and a magazine. She smiled like a woman who'd been waiting 10 years for this moment. What are you doing here? Richard's voice cracked. Gloria stepped inside. But I brought something for my niece. She walked straight to the table. She laid the Shenandoah Business Journal flat on the white tablecloth. Then she opened it to the feature spread. My photograph. The headline, Magnolia Estate Services, How a Single Mom Built a $2.3 million Business from Scratch. The magazine went hand to hand. Richard stood at the head of the table and watched his evening disintegrate. Gloria looked at her brother. You've been so busy being ashamed of your daughter, she said, that you missed what she actually became. Richard said nothing. For the first time in 63 years, Richard O'Neill had absolutely nothing to say. Frank picked up the magazine, read it, set it down. Then he turned to Richard. Richard, the land you're selling me, that's the land your daughter lives on. Richard's jaw tightened. That's a separate matter. Is your daughter being displaced because of our deal? I spoke. Not loudly, just clearly. I saw the contract on his desk last week. He asked me to sign a move-out agreement by Thanksgiving. The sale price is $410,000. And he told you the cottage was empty. Frank sat back. He rubbed his forehead. Richard, I don't do business this way. You told me that cottage was vacant. I based my offer on that. And then from the quiet end of the table, Donald spoke. I'm sorry, he said. His voice was hoarse. But this isn't right. Meredith looked at her husband. For a moment, something passed between them. She reached under the table and took his hand. Frank stood up. He buttoned his jacket. Richard, I'm going to need to pause our discussions about the land. His voice was cordial, professional, final. Everyone understood. Pause meant it's already over. Within 5 minutes people started leaving. Within 10 minutes everyone else except Richard, Patricia, Meredith, and Donald. The patriarch at the head of an empty table. His glass was still full. His plate was untouched. I lifted Lily off her chair. She wrapped her arms around my neck. I walked to where Richard and Patricia sat. I'll be out of the cottage by the end of the month. Richard looked up. Not because you asked, I said. Because I should have left a long time ago. Thea, his voice was smaller than I'd ever heard it. I'm not angry, Dad. I'm done waiting for you to see me. Patricia's face crumpled. Real tears. But for the first time, I didn't rush to fix them. I looked at Meredith. She met my eyes and nodded. I turned and walked to the front door. Gloria was on the porch. My living room is big enough, she said simply. Plenty of space for 2. Lily lifted her head. Are you the lady who sends me birthday cards? Gloria smiled. Every single year, sweetheart. I strapped Lily into her car seat, sat behind the wheel. In the rearview mirror, the house got smaller. Nobody came out to wave. I took a breath, a full one. By Sunday, the story had traveled through every pew. 14 guests meant 14 households, each told 5 more. Pastor David called Richard. I think it's best if you step back from the fundraiser committee this year. Patricia's women's auxiliary group informed her they were going in a different direction. We need people who uplift other women. The Shenandoah Business Journal hit newsstands. Kelsey's article ran with my photo. Within the week, 3 property owners I'd never contacted reached out to Magnolia. Mrs. Patterson stopped me at pickup. I saw it, she said, holding up the magazine. I always knew there was more to you. People looked at me differently, not with pity, with respect. And Richard stopped going to church, stopped going to Rotary, stopped answering his phone. Meredith called 2 days after Thanksgiving. Donald's separating, she said. I told Mom and Dad last night. Mom said, this can't be happening. First Thea, now you. Meredith's voice cracked on the word first. Not concern, but inventory. Meredith started calling me more. Short calls, awkward, honest. How did you do this at 24? She asked one night. Badly. But I did it, she laughed. A real one. I always thought you were the brave one, she said quietly. I was just the one with the diploma on the wall. We talked for another hour. It wasn't a movie ending. It was 2 women learning each other for the first time without our parents' scoreboard hanging between them. The call came 2 weeks after Thanksgiving. I was washing dishes in Gloria's kitchen when my phone lit up. "Dad," I answered. "Thea." His voice was different, smaller. "You've made your point. Can we move past this?" "Move past what exactly?" "That wasn't a thing, Dad. That was 14 people watching you humiliate your own daughter while she cooked your dinner in front of her child. I didn't mean to." "You didn't mean to get caught. There's a difference. The land deal fell through," he said quietly. Frank pulled out. "I'm in trouble. Financially. Part of me wanted to help, but I wasn't going to save a man who'd spent 6 years drowning me. When you're ready to talk, really talk, I'll be here. But I won't sit at another table where my daughter learns to be ashamed of her mother." He didn't respond. The line went dead. By mid-December, the townhouse on Maple Street was starting to feel like home. 2 bedrooms, 8 minutes from Lily's school. The first morning, Lily taped a photo to the refrigerator. Easter 2 years ago. Lily on Richard's lap. I didn't take it down because boundaries aren't about pretending people don't exist. They're about choosing how close they stand. That week Frank called about the business. "I'm expanding the portfolio," he said. 2 new developments. I want Magnolia to handle both. By January, revenue projections hit $3.4 million. I moved into a storefront on Main Street, with the Magnolia logo on glass. Gloria came over every Sunday. She'd bring pie and build Lego castles with Lily. One Sunday, Lily looked up and said, "Mommy, I told my friend today that you run a whole company." She said, "That's really cool." I said, "I know. She's my mom." I turned to the window so Lily wouldn't see me cry. But Gloria saw and just nodded. The way someone nods when they've been waiting a long time for something good. The letter arrived in March. A handwritten envelope with a stamp pressed slightly crooked. I recognized the handwriting. Tight, slanted, all capitals. I sat on the porch. Lily was at school. Inside was a single card. Just 6 words in blue ink. "Thea." I read the article. "Dad." 6 words. No apology. Just, I read the article. Part of me wanted to call him, but I didn't. I set the card on the kitchen table next to Magnolia's Gloria had brought. I didn't throw it away. I didn't frame it. I just left it there like a door cracked open. Maybe it would take years. Maybe it would never come. A full conversation. A real apology. But my peace doesn't depend on his timing anymore. I used to believe that if I worked hard enough, became successful enough, my parents would just change, like there was a magic number that would unlock their approval. But here's what I've learned. You can't earn love from people who aren't willing to give it. All you can do is stop letting that absence define you. Lily and I are eating ice cream on the porch. The sun is going down. She's got chocolate on her chin and she's laughing. This is what freedom sounds like. If this story meant something to you, share it. Not for me but for the next person who needs to hear it. Subscribe if you want more stories from real people who stood up when staying quiet would have been easier. Thank you for being here. Take care of yourselves.